Hello, and welcome back to Only a Bag. I'm your host, Darcy Melton.
And with me is myself, Nathaniel Miller. I figured Darcy can open up this episode today. This was our fifth take, and
It's a struggle today, guys.
it's a struggle today.
We're also, just so you know, testing out a different recording format of us, me being closer to the mic and me talking louder. Apparently, I'm a very quiet person. I've recently learned this, so I'm going to try to project for you guys.
It has been a lot of fun trying to edit my voice to be softer and hers to be higher. We could probably get around this by having two microphones, but instead we are huddled around one $19 Amazon microphone.
Oof,
It's actually not
boo,
Amazon.
Amazon.
It is Fine. If anybody wants it, it's actually really good. It's nice. But today, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about eating at restaurants in Rome.
Eating at restaurants in Rome, and also a bit, just I think, some general information about eating at restaurants in Italy.
Italy, yeah.
In case you have never eaten at a restaurant in Italy. Eating out at a restaurant in Italy is kind of like eating at a restaurant anywhere. It's not that different.
It's still eating at a restaurant.
Yes, they still bring you your food. But the reason we wanted to mention it or talk about it is, sometimes I feel like for us, maybe sometimes it can be a little bit awkward to kind of go into a restaurant and then not really know what you're doing and not know if you're supposed to seat yourself.
Oh, yeah. I thought you meant in general because we're introverts.
No.
You just mean, in a new place. Okay, I understand.
It can be awkward eating at a restaurant because we have, sometimes we'll go into a place to ask, to be seated, and then they're looking at us like, what are you doing? Go sit somewhere. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then they're looking at me, and then everyone else is looking at me, and then it's, I don't know. It's always a panic, and then I'm trying to find the bathroom, and then I'm walking into the kitchen, and the kitchen's, oh yeah, it's through the kitchen. I'm like, why is it through the kitchen?
We've done that so many times.
Yeah.
Just wandered around somewhere, oh God, so sorry.
So we wanted to help you avoid any potential embarrassment and anxiety-inducing situations by very quickly, in maybe 15 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Going over some of the cultural differences at eating out in Italy.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that waiters and waitresses, if you will, don't dote on you as much as you would expect in the U.S. They're not going to come around and be like, oh my gosh, how is it going over here? Can I get you anything else, guys? They'll come and ask you what you want to eat, what you want to drink, bring it to you, basically not talk to you again until you're done. And the idea behind that is that the culture here is that you probably want to just chat with whoever you're having dinner with and not constantly be interrupted by people who work at the restaurant.
Yeah. It's a lot of it is if you're there to reconnect with people or have a dinner out or have a business dinner or just hang out with your family, you don't really want the server, the wait staff to keep coming over and interrupting you. I worked as a server for a while in America for 2 years. And that's obviously very different. You're sort of expected to, your manager will, say it's been 6 minutes and you haven't been over that table. And I'm like, no. They've been talking the whole time and cracking jokes. I'm not going to walk over mid-punchline and, hey, guys, how's your food? Can I get you some more, something to drink? It's it's weird. It's very weird.
On that same note of thinking about waiters coming over, refills are not a thing. You'll order, I guess they are sometimes, but it's very rare. You'll order your drink. So if you order a soda, they'll bring over your soda in a can or bottle and put it into a glass for you, and that is your drink. Or your one beer is your one beer. Your water is not free. You'll buy it in a liter bottle, frizzante or naturale, frizzy water, bubbly water. Lovely, amazing. You guys should have some.
Not like club soda though. It's very, very gently bubbly. Very yes. It might have some bubbles. Not oh my God, I'm allergic to water. This is some spicy water.
Yeah. But so they'll bring you a liter bottle of water.
Or half liter.
Yeah. But you have to pay for it. It's usually €1, €2. But yeah, it's not free water refills, no free soda refills, no sweet tea for my people from the South. Doesn't exist, in case you didn't know that.
That was a difficult reckoning Darcy had.
I expected it. I just didn't realize I had a sweet tea problem.
No, so the drinks are definitely a different expectation. As far as here it's really common. Just, if you want another one, order another one. And they're all very cheap. Depends, again, which restaurant you go to. But even in Rome, like Darcy was saying, a bottle of water, maybe €1, €2 at the very most. wine, not wine, beer, because anywhere between €2 to €4, depending which beer you get. Wine, same thing. Again, if you go to nice wine, it's a different.
Or nice beer.
Or nice beer.
For that matter, yeah.
Or something on tap, which is a la spina. But no, it really, it depends. Like, basically, it's sort of just a different concept in general. Sort of like you get your drink and that's your drink. Unless you want another one, then you order another one. But there's no sort of I'll refill it. Don't worry about it. I'll come over with some more water. I'll come over with another soda. Not the same.
Yeah, and menu items also are accommodating, but in different ways. So what that means for me is that in the U.S., you might order, I don't know, a burger with a side of fries and this special sauce that comes on top. And in the U.S., you can probably exchange many of those items, and the waiter might be grumpy with you, but they're going to do it. Ask the chef to exchange whatever you want, change it up. That isn't really as big of a thing here. You can't really ask for things to be exchanged or taken out. Part of that is because a lot of the dishes are made with all of that involved already. Like if you get a risotto with pancetta, if I'm going to say one word with an accent, I should do both. They can't just pick out the pancetta for you, so that's a consideration. But at the same time, many menu items will come in different dishes. So if you want to order different kinds of vegetables, they each come on their own plate, or different kinds of meat, different kinds of pasta, you can do that and order multiple plates.
And on that note, when you order, how the food system works is that there's the antipasti, which we have in America, just like this, the appetizer, basically. Might be something fried, it'll be something small, just a little something to kind of whet your appetite. Then there's the primo, which is a pasta dish usually. A couple different kinds of pasta dish, that seafood pasta, marinara pasta, doesn't matter, but those are the pasta dishes. Then there is a secondo, which is usually your meat. That is like if you are going to get a steak or a piece of fish or seafood or anything like that, it'll be your secondo. And this is where the warning comes in. It usually comes very, depending where you get it. It ranges from being very simple to still simple, but there's no sides, basically. It's like
right, you will be given your piece of meat or piece of fish on a plate.
Yeah, and
maybe there's a garnish.
Right, because that's the word, you garnish. If it's sometimes it will be garnished with like some carrots or something like that. If it's a piece of fish that's been stewed in something, but it's not like there's not 4 or 5 little things on a plate with your piece of fish like there might be in America. Instead, that is the contorni, which is the contorno is one of them. It's just sort of your sides, and that's
it's
everything.
Little vegetable thingies usually, yeah.
Or it's French fries, or it's baked roasted potatoes, or whatever.
A potato is a vegetable. I keep telling you this.
I don't know if I agree with that. So that's how it's going to be separated. If you are like, I really want a steak with a side of broccoli and a side of French fries, you have to order the steak and then the broccoli and then the French fries, rather than it coming with both. But then you were saying you can't really exchange either. You can't say
right.
This sauce that you cooked the fish in, can you actually do a different sauce? And again, this is sometimes. Some places will basically, if they have no simple pasta dishes, like they have no pasta that just comes in oil, you can ask them, like, can I just have pasta with oil? And they're like, oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and it depends on the dish. I mean, pasta's a little bit different because that will likely be made fresh for you. A piece of meat might have already been stewing or going through a process, so they can't change that. Risotto might have all been made earlier, or I don't know. It just depends on the dish, really.
Also depends on the restaurant.
Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
restaurants you can kind of tell it's like, that's been sitting for a minute. And other restaurants are like, oh no, this actually took you 45 minutes to make. That's what you were doing back there.
Exactly.
It's a bit slightly different. And on the note of food, it's not, in America, I think when you go to an Italian restaurant, everyone expects breadsticks or bread at the table. And it's not undone here.
No, they definitely have bread with meals, but it just depends on what you're eating. So if you're having a pizza, you're not going to get bread because a bread is a side or before your meal because there's bread in the pizza. It's logic, guys. Or if you order pasta, same thing. They won't bring you bread because you're eating pasta. It's already essentially bread. If you get a meat or vegetable, they will sometimes bring you a little basket of bread. But I'm thinking back to the days when I went to Macaroni Grill and Olive Garden in the States. And either you would get breadsticks or, a really lovely bread, to be honest, but it would come with like oil and vinegar and different spices. That's not a thing. Your bread is kind of, it's the old school, like this is to sop up the sauce or the other thing on your plate.
Or it's to cleanse your palate. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like if you wanted to have it between bites of something, you want to kind of clean your palate a little bit. And what Darcy was just saying, really quickly, she mentioned pizza, and you don't have bread with pizza. On that note with pizza is it is a personal size. So when you order a pizza, like you want the margarita, you want the whatever, it is going to be pizza for one, not pizza for table. We've seen sometimes, though, either we walk by sometimes or we'll be with people and they'll order a pizza. Like, oh, let's just split a pizza. And it's like, well... It's not going to be very big, not something you can split. It is in and of itself. It's a dinner, and it's just really for one person. And sometimes people just get it as like, I mean, we've been with dinner with people where they get it to start. We've been at dinner with like a group of friends, and then they'll have the pizza, and then they'll have a secundo, like some meat, and then I'm just like, I'm full after the pizza. You guys are going,
Well, the same with pasta. I mean, I don't know that I've ever actually made it through a dinner where I've eaten an entire plate of pasta and then an entire or really portion of a secundo. Certainly not a meat because you and I don't eat meat. But it's a lot of food.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of food. And on the topic of restaurants in general, as you can tell, we are moving quickly through this information as to make it less of a chatty, ongoing, devolution.
Yeah, we've gotten better at not going off on tangents.
This does not count. But on the topic of restaurants, there's a difference between your tourist restaurant, your trattoria, and like more of a modern traditional, restaurant like you would expect anywhere else in the world. And I say that because Italy is still one of those, Italy is one of those countries that still have a traditional sort of restaurant in which there's only one or two offerings. And typically those like trattorias or like home style restaurants, family run restaurants. And they will offer essentially like, you want menu 1 or you want menu 2. Or even like we have, two pasta dishes, we have 2 secundos. You don't get to choose the contorni, they come out. You can choose from which house wine you want, and if you want some water, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's a simpler version of eating. It's, I don't know, like going to a mom and pop restaurant or going to kind of like almost like a family's house. It's like we've made 8 things for the day. 2 of them are pastas, 2 of them are meat, and the rest are vegetables.
If you've ever been to a place like France or something like that, we saw them out in France. It's sort of like really traditional where like sort of we noticed people who are working, but not like people who are working physically, like road workers and things like that. They would all go to these sort of restaurants, and it was just, there's one option, and that's what you get. And it's 10 euros, but you get everything. And it's a lot of the same here. And outside of touristy restaurants, there's a kind of a, more often than not, there's an interesting attachment to this combo deal. And they don't call it a combo deal, but I think from America we would. But it's sort of like, oh yeah, I spent, because it'll have a little thing of 20 euros and you get everything. You get, an appetizer, you get the pasta, you get the meat, you get the vegetables, you get the dessert, you get wine or beer, you get water, and you get a coffee when you're done. And there's still, that's really, really common, especially if you go outside of big cities. That's really common to see, like 10 euros at a restaurant to get
And I
everything.
think it is about the same price. There's a little neighborhood, if you're going to Rome, near the Lidl, great grocery store.
Lidl, by the way, not
little,
LITL,
yeah, little. There are quite a number of trattorias in that neighborhood that are pretty affordable.
Yeah.
Less than 20 euros. 10,
Easily, yeah. I think they're about
probably.
5 ahead is what we saw, and that's
Yeah.
we never went there, so we can't tell you how the food was.
But it looked awesome.
Yeah, we kept meaning to go and never got around to it because it was an hour and a half from where we were, but those are the kinds of places we look for at the very least.
Yeah.
And on the note of trattorias, trattorie, as you can tell, we have not mastered the Italian language.
We're working on it.
We are, man. But during lunch especially, like they only have one sitting. It's kind of like they'll fill up the restaurant, everybody gets their plate, because everybody's there, as a break from work. So everybody has the same break time from work. And at nights are similar. It's even if you make a reservation at a restaurant, let's just say for 8:30, they're not going to double book your table. So you're not going to come and they're like, oh, we're still waiting for them to finish up. That's your table. Even if they opened at 7, it's your table at 8:30. And then...
And for those of you thinking, 8:30, Nathaniel, that's so silly. I eat at 6 o'clock. You can get 2 sittings in. people don't really eat here until about 8 o'clock. Most restaurants don't open up until 7, 7:30, 8. So do check on that if you're someone who eats earlier than that.
A good rule of thumb is if you are going to explore all of Italy, the farther south you go, the later you'll be having dinner. The farther north you go, the earlier, typically. I don't know why that is, because in the north, in the summers, obviously it's sunnier for longer. So you'd think like, oh, you can have a later dinner. Not so much, apparently. We have not been to like Bergamo and in different regions, sort of in Milan and things like that. But we've heard a lot of people, especially from here, will go there and then go out to dinner at 8:30, and people are like, "Oh no, we're finishing up. Like we close at 9." Yeah, and they're like, 9? What do you? We just started eating. But we also have friends that go to Sicily, and they were like, "Oh my God, I was starving at 10 o'clock. They weren't going to eat till 11."
Yeah.
So it depends. Like we've definitely changed our eating habits a lot because it isn't that easy to eat early here. In the States, we did eat around 6:30 because it's just much easier to eat early, do something afterwards, watch a movie, go to bed.
Right.
But here, it's very difficult because if you want to eat out, you can't. If you want to eat early, it's like everybody's still doing stuff. So it's,
And restaurants aren't even necessarily open.
Right, especially if you want to go to a restaurant, you're out of luck. If you want to cook at your house, people might knock on your door and ask you to help them out with something. It's definitely a different culture. And if you do have kids, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end about going out to eat with kids, but if you have kids, it is something to keep in mind that in Rome, things are a little bit more metropolitan. So in the sense, more worldly. So there are places that are more used to having people come and have dinner at 6, tourists. But it isn't, if you're going to try to find like a traditional Roman restaurant, it might not be open until later in the evening.
Right.
Which can be especially weird in the winter. I don't know why you'd go to Rome in the winter. Seems like a weird time to go. But it's like, it'll get dark at like 4:30 and you can't eat until 8:30. That just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So the single sittings is kind of important. Like if even if you get to a restaurant and it doesn't look booked, because it has empty tables and you're like, oh, we're only going to be here for 30 minutes. They're like, yeah. People have made reservations for these tables. That's their table for the night. Now, this is probably not a hard and fast rule across like all restaurants, but almost every restaurant we've ever seen, it might change if it's more of an American style restaurant or if it's more, again, touristy, where they're trying to get people in and get people out.
Yeah.
But if it's anything remotely Italian, they will like, no, we have one table a night.
Yeah. Another big difference is that in the U.S., obviously, we have, what do you call it, takeaway after meals?
Yeah, it's like if you don't finish,
leftovers.
Yeah.
You can take the leftovers home. We haven't seen that here. People don't do that. I'm sure that if you go to, like Nathaniel said, a metropolitan city like Rome, or in Rome, especially the more tourist restaurants, they might be able to give you a takeaway bag, but don't expect it. Yeah. Try to eat all your food.
That's a big one.
Clean plate club.
Yeah. No, we've seen that a lot. Like, well, in America, obviously, where people will go out to eat, have half their meal, and bring the other half home, like for leftovers. But here, it's sort of like, a lot of times too, you can't even like ask the person. They come over and immediately take your plate, and before you know it, it's like in the washer. It's like, or not the washer, the sink and in the dishwasher, and you're just like, well, that was half of a burger I meant to eat. So you don't count on keeping your food afterwards. That's definitely not a thing. But I will say there is takeaway in general.
Yes.
That's a weird one. I don't know how used to takeaway they are. It was not nearly as common before COVID. We did not see as many restaurants offering takeaway. We did not see as many restaurants trying to figure out how to do that. But since COVID, because so many restaurants were allowed to stay open, not during the height of COVID, but like sort of afterwards, they were allowed to stay open if it's only takeaway. A lot of restaurants started offering takeaway and have since offered takeaway. So if you wanted to, we talked about street food earlier, but if you wanted to kind of just take something back to your hotel room, there are now
options for that.
Yeah.
Another difference is the coperta. So instead of tipping here, you don't need to tip your waiters. In the U.S., you need to tip your waiters, guys. If you don't already do that, I'm sure you do. But here, there's a coperta, which is kind of like a cover charge, and it will just be added to your bill. What is it usually?
It depends the restaurant. I think it's here, the cheapest we've seen is like $1.50 up to about €4 per person. So the more people you have, the higher the coperta. And it kind of depends where you go and how much you eat. It can be about 10 to 20%. We've been places on like, I mean, we've been to like a pizza place. It's €2 a head, so there's only two of us. It's €4, and we have whatever it is, 20 euros worth of stuff. So it ends up being €24. I'm like, oh, 20% tip is what I would have paid in the States. So a lot of times it does end up being about 20%
Right.
tip, but there is no coperta if you take away. There is a coperta if you stay. However, some restaurants will make the takeaway items slightly more expensive, like €5 for pizza instead of 4.50 to make up for not having a coperta. And the coperta really covers, basically, it's just your table linens, all that kind of stuff. So just it's not necessarily for the server doesn't get to take it home with them. It's for the restaurant to cover, costs. Basically, is the idea.
And I don't know. I think we should mention this, that waiters here are paid a fair wage. It is typically it's a career. There are schools for it, like colleges. So these people know what they're doing, and obviously, no matter where you are in the U.S. or here, you should respect restaurant workers. But here, they're really specifically trained in that career. It's not probably going to be a high school student doing this after school,
Oh yeah, no, for sure, it's definitely not. We don't think we've ever seen. I'm kind of racking my brain. I don't think we've ever seen somebody that young.
Sometimes they'll help out like in their parents' restaurants, but
Yeah.
it's not a job for them. They're like, oh, geez, my parents made me help out in the restaurant today.
That's almost always that's like a pizza place or that's like a little fried food place. But if you go to a restaurant, it's again, depending if it's a really nice one that's tiny. Sometimes it's only like two people. Like there are like agroturismos, which are sort of it's like a hotel on the property of a farm, and in theory that you're supposed to eat what that farm provides you. And
Right.
there are a couple outside of Rome, like a couple hundred outside of Rome. It's kind of a popular thing to kind of go stay, have all your meals there, but then take a bus or train into the city. And for instance, in these, there might not even be a server. It might be the person who cooks the food will bring it out to you.
Right.
But in a restaurant, it will be adults. These are like, people who went, like Darcy said, they went to school for it, whether it be college or some sort of secondary school for it. They're moving up in their careers. It's just not like, they're probably not the restaurant they're going to stay at their whole life. But in that sense is like because these people are professionals, they aren't, you can't really. I sort of say this to anyone because we've seen people kind of threatening with tips or I'm not going to tip you, and they're like, you don't tip me, you're also not going to get me fired. We don't have that same sort of customers always right rule in Italy as we do in America. So if a customer is remotely sort of out of line, they can simply be like, get out now. We don't really need your money. It's also here, especially here in Italy. Rome, again, different. It's a big city, which is kind of why we're bringing up the differences. But not as reliant on reviews. There are a number of restaurants, especially like anywhere south of Rome, that are phenomenal restaurants that have a massive word of mouth population, but have no online presence whatsoever. I'm talking Google Maps, Instagram, anything like that, Facebook, nothing.
Yeah.
Everybody has the WhatsApp number of the chef, and that's how they make their, the reservations, or everybody kind of knows whose family runs the restaurant. But, so saying like, I'll leave you a bad review, they're kind of like, all right, go for it.
Karens beware, you have no power here.
Yeah, that's kind of the gist of that statement.
A quick word on drinking when you're eating out. Obviously, we're in wine country, not beer country. So the selection of wines will be greater, most likely, than the selection of beers. And most places will have a house red and a house white. That's usually what I plump for because they're great. In my opinion, I'm not a wine connoisseur.
You're also not a beer connoisseur.
I'm also not a beer connoisseur. I have been criticized for my tastes, but I think the house wines are lovely.
PBR is Darcy's favorite top shelf beer.
It's not top shelf. It's just inexpensive and wholly American. They know probably not. They've probably been bought out.
I think Budweiser owns them, which I think is like a Danish company.
Anyways, but yeah. So on talking about beer, there will be far fewer beer options than you're probably expecting if you're coming from the States. But if you go to Rome, there are specific, like beer restaurants and beer bars and birrerias. Birrerie. Is that the word?
Rolling the R's is very difficult sometimes in an Italian, in the Italian language.
Yeah, sorry. I really caught myself off trying to say beer joint in Italian. But there are also, like beer gardens and stuff, which aren't specifically Italian, but because Rome is more of a globalized international city now, they will have more of that than you'd find in a smaller town here.
And beer, if you are somebody who really enjoys beer, especially local brewed, 0 kilometer local, that whole, because I know in America, obviously it's huge. I don't know if it's still huge, but it was a couple of years ago. It's not as big here yet. I think it's growing. There are now birrerias that are coming up closer to us, that are popping up. There are places around us that make local beer. Not yet. It's like two guys in a bathtub. It's more of like they had some serious funding and then they started doing this. But also sometimes some of the local beer things have been making it for like 40 years, and they're just tiny and they never wanted to get beyond tiny. But at a restaurant, you'll probably see like Peroni or Nastro Azzurro. Those are the two biggest ones. And then sometimes restaurants, or not sometimes, oftentimes restaurants are almost sponsored by beers. So you'll notice that their napkins or the little coasters, these little cardboard coasters, paper coasters. Sometimes they have a little light over the door, like a little glow up box, and that'll be a different brand of beer, maybe one you've heard of, maybe one you haven't. It's really common here, especially we'll talk about this next episode with cafes, but for companies who make drinks to like sponsor their drink at a restaurant, and it kind of becomes the drink there. But it's still people just go for Peroni or Nastro because it's much cheaper. And it's
that's
just
the PBR of Italy.
That's honestly the PBR. That's the lifeblood of Italy.
It really
is. So if you are into beer, I don't recommend unless you really, really, really want to go spelunking the caverns of beer culture here, which are tiny and possibly barely existent. You might not get that lucky. But of course, obviously, if you like wine, a lot of restaurants, especially little family-owned restaurants, will sell wine that's either their own production or they'll sell wine that is a production of somebody they know. So, for instance, they sell wine that you really like. You ask them, where'd you get this wine? They're like, oh, yeah, we made it. And you're like, okay, can you give me some to go? We have tried that before a couple of restaurants because this is really good. Mixed results. Sometimes they won't.
But on that note, what we were talking about in the last episode is going to markets, and a couple of the markets have great local wine. So if you are really into some Roman wine, you can maybe ask what kind of grape they used or where it was made, and you might be able to find something similar at one of the markets.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, those markets, we haven't really found a beer version.
Nope, but I love wine, so I'm okay with that.
We'll get there eventually.
Another thing that we talked about in our last episode a lot was traveling when you're a family, especially with young kids. And I know we've talked a lot about going to little places and supporting, small family restaurants. Nathaniel and I obviously are all about that. They also always have kind of better food, in my opinion. But if you're a parent of small children and you're traveling with them, obviously it might be easier for you to go to one of the more touristy restaurants that, if you're near the Pantheon and it's dinner time for your kids, it's 5:00, go to one of the restaurants near the Pantheon. If you can afford it. They tend to be a little more expensive, but if you keep walking maybe 5 minutes farther, you'll find something that is cheaper. But there's no shame in eating close to tourist attractions if you need to for your situation.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And it depends where you're staying. Darcy and I tend to look for, if we stay at hotels, it's cheaper ones. Same with Airbnbs. So they tend to be on the outskirts of nicer places. They don't tend to be in the nice place. But if you are staying at a hotel that is not sort of in the midst of the touristy area, but a little bit outside, like for instance, Barberini is sort of just outside, like the touristy area, which would be like the Spanish Steps, basically. They're very close together, and Barberini's on a metro stop, and it's a great place to stay if you need to, easy transportation. But you can ask, the person, either the Airbnb, whoever rented you out the Airbnb, or the front desk person at the hotel, and ask if they have any recommendations for something that's super easy, super quick. But that's also, because again, it's like here with kids, we've noticed that I don't know if there's like no bedtime. I don't know if that just doesn't exist in Italy, which is totally cool. Love that. But it's often you'll be walking around 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and restaurants will still be open, and there'll just be kids running around. And it's like on Tuesday, and I'm like, isn't there school tomorrow? There's school tomorrow, right? I'm like, I'm not crazy. Like,
it gives us anxiety. I'm like, man, my bedtime was 2 hours ago. What are you doing awake?
No, I'm like, I'm barely awake at this point. So it's a little bit different. The same thing too. It's like a lot of times they will have chairs for children, but I think it's more often that we see them like what is it called? High chairs?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't often see high chairs in restaurants here.
Yeah. So
I think some of them obviously have them, but it probably isn't like if you go to Applebee's and they have like a stack of 16 in the back.
Yeah.
It's not the same here.
Sometimes it'll just be like, oh, can you hold your kid on your lap? And they're like, no, I want to eat. I'm not going to drop pasta sauce on my kid's head. Or maybe you want to. Who knows? I don't know. Might be funny. Your kid might find it hilarious.
Nathaniel, with his great parenting advice.
Yeah, don't trust me. But no, that's just something to kind of keep in mind is the you can get a little bit creative. But if you are, like you were saying, if you are a parent and you just need food and it's getting late and you want to go to bed or you want to put the kids to bed so you can stay
Especially
up.
if you're someone whose kids only eat like macaroni or chicken nuggets at the whatever phase they're going through. You're going to find those at the more touristy spots.
Yeah.
Certainly not at the trattorias. You're going to have to be like, well, no chicken nuggets tonight, just spaghetti.
Yeah.
You know.
But that being said, they will work with kids as far as like, for instance, we don't obviously, like we mentioned this 100 times now, but we don't eat meat. But then it's if we go to a place that just makes pasta, but they don't make any pasta that day without meat, we often ask, can I just get pasta with like red sauce? And they're like, oh yeah, of course.
Right.
And some places are very rare, but they won't like, especially down south, if you just get like vegetables or something, they won't charge you if you just like, like I'm not
They're like, you didn't even eat. You only had vegetables.
Yeah, it's like they're just vegetables. I'm like, oh my god, you people are ridiculous. So that might happen, but but it is sometimes if you have a kid and you're just like not necessarily off menu, but you can just ask for like a stripped down version,
Right.
And they will usually do that as long as it's not like Darcy's saying, like sometimes like. If a ragu has meat in it, so if they're like, oh, we only have ragu, we can't take the meat out. I mean, it's not possible.
Right.
That can be really difficult. But if they're like, oh, we can crack open a can of tomatoes and make a quick sauce and give it to your kid, there's no issue. There are options basically.
Right.
There are definitely options for eating with families. But I think that's all we wanted to quickly mention.
Yeah, I think that wraps up restaurants. Wow, that was such an efficient episode.
Such an efficient episode. This is what happens when two people are not going off on tangents.
Two people. I think you mean Nathaniel.
One person is kept to a tangentless existence. We're at 32 minutes. I think we said we were going to be at 15, so we did really well.
You've done it again, though. You've doubled the time, but that's okay. I think it was great.
But we'll do another, at some point in the future, we will do a whole longer episode on restaurants in the South, kind of going maybe more into detail and this and that of what you expect, what you find, especially outside of bigger cities. We actually never mentioned sitting down.
What about sitting down?
Really quick on sitting down. Usually with restaurants, you do seat yourself. There isn't somebody to sit you. Sometimes there's somebody to sit you. I guess like America, you kind of have to just.
No, we walk up to people and we're like, hey, can we sit? And they're like, yeah. Either yeah, go sit down, seat yourself, or yes, just a moment, I'll take you over there.
It really depends on the place and the vibe you're picking up. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times what you can do is just catch the eye of somebody and point at like an empty table, and then they'll either gesture, yeah, of course. Or they're like, no, come here, and I'll seat you. So I have to seat you somewhere else.
Right.
It depends. Again, that's really, really genuinely depends on the restaurant. Like I think the places that are more touristy, a little more Western or Americanized, prefer to seat you. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the places, because again, there isn't that thing about tips. So mm-hmm. It's not like they're not trying to balance the tips out between the servers. I don't even know if they have sections here like they do in America. Every mm-hmm. server has their own section.
But if you are going inside somewhere to a restaurant, they probably will see you, but certainly catch someone's eye before you just go wandering off into the restaurant.
I think the good rule of thumb is if it's inside, you will be sat by someone. If it's outside, you can seat yourself.
Pretty much.
We'll talk about this a little bit more, especially as it comes to cafes, because that's a different sort of rule of thumb. But I think that was all for this episode.
I think that's it, yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for your time. And Darcy, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome, Nathaniel. Thanks for being here.
This has been a great experience. I will add it to my resume.
If you'd like to follow us, I'm at, what am I? At Not Mr. Darcy. I'm at Not Mr. Darcy on Twitter.
Darcy Mountain might be easier to find. And I'm at Mellor Nathaniel on Twitter. I usually put it in the description as well. Watch me forget on this one, though. But if you'd like to follow us and read about all of our rare tweets that we almost never post, please feel more than free.
Or comment at us.
Yes.
And if there's something specific about Rome that you want to know.
That'd be even more helpful. If there's anything you'd like to hear us talk about, or anything, any questions you have, or any sort of topic you'd like discussed, definitely reach out to us. Definitely ask us, and we'd be more than happy to work an episode out for it.
Yeah, we'll do our best. No promises.
Yes, we can only talk for so long.
I meant more that we might not know, but we'll try.
Well, we can talk for a while. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Nathaniel, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you join us next episode. We're going to be talking about cafes and coffee.
And drinks in Rome.
And drinks in Rome, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for your time, and we hope to see you on the next one.